Chapter 1. The Storm. Lord, my boat is so small, and the sea is so large. Unknown. Dawn's first light peered through the angry-looking gray clouds and illuminated a menacing, dark, red, rusty sky. The extraordinary sunrise reminded us of the old adage, red skies in the morning, sailors take warning, red skies at night, sailors delight. And this sky was definitely indicative of unsettled weather. Uneasily, we began the day aboard our yacht Elysium as it lay at anchor in Niafu, Tonga. Elmer and I had sailed to this small island in the South Pacific several months before and were anchored off the only small town in the Vava'u group of the Tongan Islands. Vava'u is the northern island of the island group and is situated north of New Zealand and west of the islands of Fiji. We had chosen to stop at this well-protected anchorage, a beautiful bay, offering excellent shelter from wind and storms. People came from all over the world, chartering yachts to sail around the lush green landforms lined with coral reefs and to dive in the crystal-clear water. Later in the day, the weather was still making us nervous, so we turned on our radio to find a weather report for the South Pacific. 60 knots of wind was forecast for the area. 60 knots of wind? A hurricane could be coming. Despite the troubling forecast, we were comforted by the fact that we were in a safe anchorage. Tonga had not experienced a hurricane for 21 years, and life seemed to be continuing as normal on the small island. We noticed that several of the 40 to 50-foot yachts that were anchored in the moorage were still bobbing around, and the people who had chartered them were sitting on deck enjoying their afternoon cocktail. We also saw the small Tongan fishing boats were tied up inside the bay, suggesting to us that the local people, with their innate knowledge of the sea and its moods, were not concerned about the weather. Elmer and I believed that the locals would be the first to know about any impending danger and would have pulled their boats on shore for preparation. Although most of our neighbors seemed to be unconcerned, Elmer and I were feeling very uneasy. We decided the boat would be more secure if we set out additional anchors. More anchors would provide greater holding power in case the wind did approach or exceed the forecast speed. In the back of my mind, I wondered how I would react if we were ever faced with a hurricane. How would I handle the extreme danger? Could I react adequately to the things that might be required of me? Or would I be paralyzed with fear? Inside the 1-mile-wide bay, there were 16 visiting yachts at anchor. They were yachts running in lengths from 32 to 70 feet and had sailed here from various parts all over the world. We loaded 2 more anchors into the dinghy and rowed out to set them in what we felt would be strategic areas to help us hold Elysium in a strong wind. While we were struggling with the anchors, a large sailboat from Germany, anticipating a problem, began changing positions in the bay. The owner and skipper of the 58-foot sailing yacht, Aseta, had also heard the weather forecast and was tying his stern to shore and setting out 2 anchors from the bow of the boat out into the bay. Elmer and I realized his choice of anchoring would put him directly in the lee of the wind. He had positioned himself so the full force of the wind would blow on the broadside of his yacht, a potentially dangerous situation. As the wind increased throughout the day, the sea became more and more agitated. There was an unusual roughness troubling it, even though the wind was only blowing about 30 knots. We noticed that the relaxed mood in the bay was quickly changing to one of concern as the weather conditions grew more menacing. Skippers pulled up their anchors, and boats returning after a day of racing at sea all searched for a safe anchorage with more protection in case a hurricane did materialize. Afternoon faded and darkness brought progressively stronger winds. We watched our wind speed gauge rise. At 40 knots, the anchorage began to feel rough and uncomfortable. At 60 knots, the wind was snatching up the sea into scary, sloppy chops and violently tossing the boat around. We watched with increasing apprehension as the needle of our wind speed gauge indicated that the wind speed had reached 63 knots. The sea was fierce. The waves were frighteningly large, and Elysium was tugging hard at her anchors.